Everybody. Once again, we have DePauli on here from Pure Hearts Therapy to give us more sensory insights. Today, we're talking about mouthing and chewing behaviors and everything that happens in between with that, why they happen. So, welcome back to the show, DePauli.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
All right. For the people who don't know you yet, go ahead and give them a quick background about yourself and who you are.
So I'm an occupational therapist. Graduated from Midwestern, which is in Arizona. I've been kind of, doing a lot of different population, but kind of landed on pediatric population. I love the pediatric population. Kind of did everything: outpatient, inpatient, home health. And then along the way, I've learned Ayurveda, which is an alternative medicine. So, just natural healing medicine and learned that along the way. So I love having kind of both sides of the coin in my learning and in my experience.
Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I like to start with this, just so people have idea what we're talking about. What do you think is going to be a key takeaway that anyone listening to this will get out of this episode?
Yeah, I think the key takeaway it's going to be seeing some of the signs, seeing, like, okay, is this normal for my child to do or not? And then if it is not, what kind of help can I get? What can I do? What's the overall support I can get from it? What does it look like? I think those are some of the things that we will discuss and talk about and what it looks like that will help you kind of understand in general what mouthing and chewing is.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead get this going. So, what would you say is mouthing and chewing behaviors if we just get started? What might that look like at a in a setting at home?
Yeah. So at setting at home, if I were to see a child doing a lot of mouthing, they're going to put objects that are not food objects in their mouth. And this could be clothing, so they can take their t-shirt and bundle it up and put it in their mouth. It could be like toys that are sitting around and they'll just stick it in their mouth and really sometimes chew on it hard or really like suck on it hard. Sometimes some kids put their arm in their mouth, so like on the side, and sometimes even break skin and it causes bleeding sometimes. But um, an excessive chewing or mouthing is like putting those things in the mouth to the point that they can't get away from it. And it's hard to do other things in their daily activities because it's just taking over. Like this is something they constantly keep doing. And usually it's non food items.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely seen that in my practice as well. It's just like I this one is common, like biting the hand
Yes.
and then
Yep.
also just like clothing. So what causes this and how is this related to sensory?
Yeah. So what causes is it's again it's we've talked about the different sensory systems, and this one is related to the oral. So they're not getting enough stimulation through their oral cavity. So especially with our ASD kids or anybody with sensory processing disorder, they're trying to get more input in their body to regulate their body. They don't feel regulated, so they will take whatever it is and then try to jam it up and try to get that sensation. So sometimes it becomes more and more. So actually, like kids that have a harder time or do it even more are people who are kids that are under responsive because they're trying to do that much more to get that much of an input through there. So in a short answer, it's sensory regulation. They're trying to regulate their body, but there's so many different things that can cause them to do it. It could be anxiety. There's some anxiety. They're not okay with their environment. They're not feeling safe. It could be boredom. They might be bored with something. They might not be getting enough deep pressure through their mouth. So there's so many different reasons why a child could be mouthing. Um, and doing that, they might not be getting proper, like that nervousness kicks in so much that they're just going to bite on it so hard or they don't feel it. So many reasons, but anxiety sometimes is a big one for some of these kids to help regulate their body because they don't know how else to regulate it.
Gotcha. So let's kind of use an example. I got someone I'm working with, and it could be your child. They're biting on their thumb or their palm. Where do we start? What's kind of like you said, there could be a lot of different things. So where are we starting at, especially as they're working with a therapist? Where do we go from there?
Yeah, I think first for a parent is always recognition. So I kind of talk about the stages. If a child is 0 to 1 year old, then it's a normal thing for them too because they're exploring, they're trying to figure things out, putting things in their mouth. That's how they're trying to understand their environment. They get between 1 to 3 year old, it's like kind of your middle stage, they're still exploring, they're getting teethings that hurt, so they're trying to put jam things in there because they're like, oh, it hurts, it's just a way for like body to like react to it. And then but at the same time they should be kind of getting off of that towards the end of that. And then if they're between 3 to 5, those are our biggest red flags, because at that point we shouldn't be using a pacifier, we shouldn't be trying to jam things in our mouth anymore. We've done that exploration. That's a natural phase that the child does, is an exploration of like putting hand in the mouth. That phase kind of ends. And if they're still doing it and they're doing it excessively or to the point that they can't stop and be part of that, that should be our big red flag. So I always start with understand where is your child at age, and not freak out too early. But then if that does happen, then seeing those red flags. The second thing would be, yeah, addressing an OT, an occupational therapist, and having an evaluation done and getting the proper support for that. And then an OT will do what they do, but an occupational therapist will go in and help you create a plan. You can get educated by the occupational therapist by coming into the sessions and saying what's going on, what's not going on. And then always, I always say this for almost everything, keeping something, like write it down. Okay, my kids started excessively doing this when they were nervous about, like, let's say if transition is a hard thing for them, and then as soon as they have to transition to something, they just start biting their hand. Okay, there's a red flag that you can like recognize. So always trying to find a pattern of what's happening, like a pattern of like, okay, this behavior happens, so then this behavior happened. But because it could be, they could be just stimming, they're just trying to get that extra input. So always first figuring out what age group are they in. Those are our red flags, and then um, figuring out what do they see their triggers to be at.
All right. So if they're kind of past that age 5 and they're past exploratory and all that, it's kind of like, hey, we should look into this. I think that why could that be bad, right? If they're always chewing and whatnot, what are there any downsides to that?
Yeah, yeah. Many. One, they might have issues with eating. So what happens is they're getting their sensation through putting things in their mouth. So they're not going to want to take that out and work on different textures of eating, because it's not, that food is not giving them the same sensation, that same regulation as putting something in their mouth. So they're not getting that regulation through their thing. So they're going to refuse to eat. And if they don't eat, then nutrition is an issue, health is an issue, weight could be an issue. They might not be getting their vitamins and minerals and everything that they need because of lack of eating. Two is germs, honestly, because they're going to pick up whatever they can that's sitting on the floor. The dog might have licked it, or it could have been sitting somewhere else. They're putting it in their mouth. And then they're putting it down. So, of course, that area is also getting contaminated. So, we're having constant, like, cross contamination, germs, and then of course, they might. I see a lot of these kids in a constant state of having a cold and congestion, and it's just something that I've seen over and over with a lot of my kids here that do a lot of mouthing. The other thing is their social interaction. They won't try to use their words because they're too busy using their mouth to do this. So they're not going to want to like take it down and work on responding or work on speech or work on any of that kind of stuff. especially if they're stimming, they're so into it, then social participation becomes an issue. So if a child is a school going child, the other peers are not going to want to participate with them, talk to them, because one, they're too busy, working on their, like, just working on chewing and things like that. And then, of course, there's not going to be a social interaction. So there's going to be some of that isolation. So I feel like it goes into so many things. And then I believe the other biggest one I've seen is a lot of kids that do a lot of mouthing with their hand, they break skin. So they're always like, there's blood coming out sometimes. There's um, just rawness of their skin and just a lot of pain that happens, and then that really becomes sensitive. So also that way. So yes, it does affect many aspects of their life.
Wow. It's kind of interesting to think about because it seems so simple, but yeah, like you said, social, school, developmental, just the overall health. There's so many impacts in it. So it's something we want to try to get ahead of if we can, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Okay. So let's try to get ahead of it. Let's start diving into some of these strategies. Where would we, what's our next step? As an OT, maybe we could use an example
Yeah.
and go from there.
Yeah, as an OT, first obviously you got to do an evaluation, and in that evaluation, you're first and foremost trying to figure out what the triggers are. You and you take a couple of sessions. First, you want to get comfortable with the child, make sure they feel safe, and you're figuring out triggers. As you do that, you'll start using strategies. So there's strategies of replacing it with something else. So always replacing it with something else so they can get more input on. So now it's really great. They have non-toxic, chewable or jewelry, I think is what they call it. It's basically jewelry that kids can chew on, that can go around their neck, that can go around their arm, that they can chew on. Sometimes it can just, and a lot of them will have textures on it, so they'll get more input through it. So OTs will talk to parents and educate parents, and if you're a school OT, then in schools, educate the teachers on using these replacement. But along with that, there's going to be a lot more of sensory integration kind of things that an OT will do. So they'll do a lot of weighted activities. So giving them like weighted back pats, is what something an OT will talk about, or putting a weighted vest on, or clothing, tight clothing on. We would do a lot of weight bearing activities. And what that means is putting your hands down and putting weight through your upper body, your arm, because sometimes you have to figure out, are they wanting that oral impact, or that oral stimulation through their mouth or through their hand? Because sometimes they're chewing really hard because they're not getting that deep pressure in their hand. So you want to figure out, is it the mouth, is it the hand, and then work from that. But doing a lot of weight bearing activities is an amazing thing. And then really like opposite, like also like I use a lot of sensory bins. I have them put their hands in their sensory bins to go exploring, to go exploring, so they find objects and things like that, and again they're getting that stimulation through their hand to work on calming situations. Also, always having a safe space so that they can go to, and then they can just take a break. So whether it's at home, whether it's in school, whether it's in therapy, it's like, hey, break time, I need to get away from this and go have that space. um, but yeah, OTs will use a lot of these strategies, and then OTs will also work on giving a home exercise program. And if you're in school, then educating the teacher on a lot of these things. But I have noticed, I had a kid who was always putting their hand in their mouth, and then I started doing a lot of like weight bearing activities, animal walks, things like that. And slowly, it started decreasing because they were getting input from other ways. The other things OTs like to do, it's called a Z vibrator. It's like this skinny little vibrator that you can like give the input through the mouth. So if they're really, really seeking input through their mouth, then we can use some of that vibration. Vibrating toothbrushes, we tell parents like, hey, when you do brushing the teeth at home, like use the one that slightly vibrates. It shouldn't be too strong, but just so it gives them that input, and then they are going to want to do that activity. um, engaging them in fine motor activities. So really working on doing things with their hand. And while you're doing that, work on speech or work on different things as well, because then at that point they're not too busy doing their stimming through the mouth. But yeah, OTs use a lot of different strategies with that.
Those are all great examples. I loved all of them. I wonder maybe analogy for kind of explaining if we need that sensory input is almost like like us if we just like feel like we need to move and go to the gym, right? And then you feel much better afterward. Or if you're feeling sick, maybe we just lay down and that's kind of like an example of kind of like regulating. Would you say it's kind of similar to that for our kids?
Yes, 100%. It's kind of like I don't know if you've ever like even just been one of those kids that like chew on a pencil, or chew on a pen because you're just really concentrating and then you can't do it. And then you just focus in and it helps you focus in when you're like chewing and you're giving that input to the mouth. But yes, it just helps them regulate. They don't know how to do it safely. They don't know how to do it what's a proper way of doing this, how to get the most input out of this. So their body doesn't know that, so it just does that. And when they do that, it does. It helps them decrease their own anxiety. It can help them feel stimulated for kids that are under responsive. And yeah, they'll be happier. They'll feel more calm. They'll feel more balanced in their body. But then it just takes over because then they're like, oh, this, they start making connection like this makes me feel good, so I need to do more of it. So they make these connections in their head that this equals to this. And then so they'll do more and more of it because it makes them feel good. Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So I'll kind of backtrack a little bit. So first step, you start noticing these behaviors, especially after 5. It might be concerning because of all the implications that could happen. Once we start notice, once it starts to become more of a trigger, then we start consulting a professional like an OT or anyone who has any
Yeah.
specialized training in sensory. Um, and then from there, work with the OT and kind of really break down what it is, right? Hands, is it mouth? Where do we need that input? So, with that being said, what are what like someone who maybe hasn't doesn't have an OT or they're just getting started out, what's some of the strategies that they could just start doing at home? Maybe something simple that they can incorporate into their day that anyone could adapt from or implicate at home.
Yeah, 100%. They can start. What I love doing with parents usually is creating a plan, right? So they can have a plan. So doing a lot of bubbles, for example, that's an easy one. Having them grab it and then having them blow through their mouth because that's going to give them input with using bubbles. Because again, with bubbles, you got to fill it up with air, puff up your face. You're giving kind of like a deep pressure through the mouth when you do it. So we should all like practice doing like, what does it feel to do, blow bubbles and like take a deep breath in and blow the bubble out. And you're doing multiple things. You're working on that anxiety because you're taking a deep breath in, you're blowing out, you're working on a deep breathing exercise. But at the same time, you're giving deep pressure through the mouth because they feel that, and you're blowing, right? And that's a really fun one to do. We kind of talked about using an electric toothbrush, using that, having them start doing that to increase that input through their mouth. Whenever they have to do anything or go get anything, like, oh, can you be a bear and go get that? Can you be a snake and go do that? Let's hop like a frog or different things like that. And using those animal walks to just give them that input that they want, that deep pressure that they're seeking. And then I think the biggest thing I always say is have a safe corner. So at home, have an area that you can like, it could be like one of those little teepee tents that they have for kids. I love doing that for parents. That's one of my biggest things I tell parents, like have a little teepee tent and then have things in there. So sensory toys, bubbles, you can put little posters of deep breathing or, and just kind of post things that are like safe. It could be a sensory toy, different things like that that they can go into anytime they want, kind of get away from everything and have their breaks. The other thing parents can do is have a schedule. So if anxiety is a trigger point, Let your kid know what they're about to do. The more certainty they have, the more they know what's going to happen next. It will decrease our anxiety. They're like, okay, I know this is happening, and then this is happening, and this is happening. And if there's decreased anxiety, then there will be decreased mouthing or needing to do that to feel safe. So I would say a few couple of the biggest ones I would say is like having a schedule and having a safe space, and then building some of that sensory activities around it.
Love that, having a safe space. Um, and sensory, I mean, that's just good in general. I
Yeah.
do want to go back and point out that one thing you said right at the beginning, where you kind of mentioned about the bubbles, where it's kind of like if you think about the bubbles, what's going in your mouth. And I don't, tell me if it's the same for you, but sometimes when I see kids and they have certain behaviors or something that looks interesting, I'm trying to explore it. I kind of imitate it and see how it feels like for me, and then it kind of gives me an idea of kind of what sensory sensation they may be getting out of that. Do you find that to be similar?
Yes, yes, 100%. I always do the activities. I always do that whole thing. Even in school, I remember one of the things we had to do was drink out of a water bottle. I mean, a milk bottle, to just see how much of that sucking motion you need. You need a lot of strength in that sucking. So, you can see like, wow, how much they're really needing that input based on how hard they're going at a toy or going, at that thing. Like, so it's always good to like experiment yourself to see like, oh man, they're really needing that much more input, and this is what it feels like for my child. So I do. I love experimenting. Before the other fun one to do actually is sucking, and this is a great one for kids too. From a skinny straw, drink a very thick smoothie. Because if you do
Mm.
that, you will see how much like sucking motion and input you get through your mouth. Because you really have to like use almost your whole like mouth to like try to suck like a smoothie through a skinny straw, and that's a great activity also for some of our kids. But that's a fun one to test out yourself to see what it feels like around the mouth.
Yes, yes. All right. What else are we missing here that we haven't talked about today?
I think the biggest thing, and I always go back to this, is always having support for the parent, and the parent should always feel like they're in the know of their child. And so I always think communication with the therapist, with the teacher, with the parent is it's a big thing. Like being in a community for each other. So the parent's always going to know their kid the best, because that's their kid. And I think the OT comes in with their expertise. So having them merge to work towards that child and having the best for that child is the best way to do things. So for a parent to join sessions, if it's a home health, join sessions, if it's an outpatient clinic, join the sessions. Be educated on what's happening, why they're doing what they're doing, because they'll help you use some of those strategies at home. And then I think for an OT to really provide a home health program for the parent so they can, do some of this at home and utilize those things at home. So I would say the biggest thing is support and communication, to always communicate with each other, things that are going on, education, and then supporting. I think supporting is a huge thing for all our parents.
I like that, and I definitely want to kind of reinforce that the communication because every person's so different, every child's so different. So
Yes.
one strategy that worked for one kid may not work for another, or you may just look at a
100%.
different method, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, just we just talked about so many even just triggers, right? So like it could be a complete different trigger for one child versus another child versus another child. So yeah, it could be so many array of things that could be happening with the child. Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's it for us today. I definitely want to say thank you for coming on. And then also, too, if any parents are looking for anything sensory, consultation advice, DePauli is the person to reach out to. She's also on our website, and we will have a link for her if you want to reach out to her and ask those direct questions and work directly with her. A great resource to have.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Brian.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks to Polly, and I'll see you on the next one. Actually, speaking of that, our next topic, do you remember what our next topic is?
Give me
Crashing.
a
The crashing.
yes, yes.
Yes. So our next topic that the webinar we're going to have in podcast is going to be about crashing behaviors and how to handle that. So if that's something that you see in your child or adult, and you want to explore strategies for that, we're going to be talking about that some more on our next one.
Awesome. Yeah, I look forward to it.
All right. Thanks again to Polly. See you on the next one.
Thank you.
Okay.